A woman stands at the entrance of a tent. The sun has set behind the hills of Mamre, and the evening air carries the smell of roasted grain. She is 90 years old. Her husband is 100, and the two strangers sitting at their fire have just told her she will have a baby. She laughs. Not a polite laugh. Not a hopeful laugh. The Hebrew word is Tsachaq. Pull it apart. The root is tsara-chet-kof, and it does not simply mean to laugh. It carries the sense of play, of mockery, of something half joyful and half dangerous. When Isaac plays with his wife Rebekah, the text uses Tsachaq. When Ishmael mocks Isaac, the text uses Tsachaq. When Lot's sons-in-law think he is joking about God's judgment, the text uses Tsachaq. The same word for play, for scorn, for disbelief, for joy. Sarah's laugh was all of these at once. A laugh that comes from the belly, the kind that escapes before you can stop it. She laughs because the promise is absurd. She laughs because she has waited 25 years for this child, and her body has long since stopped cooperating. She laughs because sometimes the only honest response to God is disbelief. Her name is Sarah, and her laugh will become her son's name. Isaac, Yitzhak, he laughs. Every time she calls her boy to dinner, she will remember the night she laughed at God, and God laughed back. This is not a video about theology. This is not a study of ancient gender roles. This is not a list with footnotes. This is the story of the wives, the women who stood beside, behind, and sometimes far ahead of the men whose names fill the chapter headings. Some of them saved nations. Some of them destroyed kings. Some of them did both in the same afternoon. You know Abraham, you know Moses, you know David, but do you know the women who made their stories possible and the women who nearly ended them? Stay with me, because some of these stories will genuinely shock you. Sarah is the first wife named in the Bible, and she is also one of the most complicated. She was beautiful enough at 65 that Abraham feared Pharaoh would kill him to have her, and Abraham's solution was to lie. He told Pharaoh she was his sister. Technically a half-truth, she was his half-sister. But the deception put Sarah in Pharaoh's court, in Pharaoh's house, possibly in Pharaoh's bed. Abraham saved his own life by offering his wife's body as collateral. You can imagine how Sarah felt about that. And he did it twice. Once in Egypt, once in Gerar with King Abimelech. Two different kings, the same lie, the same cowardice, the same wife, handed over like property. But Sarah was not passive. When the promise of a son felt impossible, she took matters into her own hands. She gave her servant Hagar to Abraham as a surrogate. Sleep with her, Sarah told him. Maybe I can build a family through her. Abraham agreed without argument. Genesis does not record him praying about it. He simply went to Hagar's tent. And when Hagar conceived, when the plan worked, Sarah was furious. The Hebrew says Hagar despised Sarah, a servant carrying the master's child, looking down at the barren wife. Sarah drove Hagar into the desert, pregnant, alone, into the wilderness where people die. God found Hagar by a spring of water. He told her to go back. He promised her a son too. Ishmael. 2 women, 2 sons, 2 nations, and the conflict between them is still burning 4,000 years later. Here is what most people miss. Sarah is not the villain of this story. She is not the hero either. She is a woman trapped between a divine promise and a biological impossibility, married to a man who twice traded her safety for his own. She laughed at God because 25 years of waiting had taught her that hope is expensive. And God did not punish her for laughing. He named the miracle after it. Here is a detail that changes how you read this story. In the 3rd century, the church father Origen wrote that Sarah's laugh was a sin, an act of disbelief that God graciously overlooked. For 15 centuries, Christian commentators followed Origen's reading. Sarah was the doubter, the weak one, the woman who failed to believe. It took modern Hebrew scholars returning to the original text to notice what Origen missed. The narrator of Genesis does not condemn Sarah's laugh. God does not punish it. He names the child after it, Tsachaq. He laughs. The laugh was not a failure of faith. It was the most honest prayer she had ever prayed, and God honored it. Rebekah is the wife who changed everything with a bowl of soup. She enters the story like a scene from a film. Abraham's servant has traveled 500 miles to find a wife for Isaac. He stops at a well and prays a very specific prayer. Let the woman who offers water to me and my camels be the one. Before he finishes praying, Rebekah appears. She offers water. She waters 10 camels, which takes an extraordinary amount of effort and time. She is generous, strong, and decisive. She marries Isaac. She is barren for 20 years. Another long silence. And when she finally conceives, she carries twins who fight inside her so violently that she asks God, "Why is this happening to me?" God answers with a prophecy. 2 nations are in your womb. The older will serve the younger. Remember that. It matters. Years later, Isaac is old and blind and ready to pass the family blessing to his firstborn, Esau. This is the most consequential moment in the family, the transfer of God's covenant promise. And Rebekah engineers a fraud. She dresses Jacob in goatskins to feel like hairy Esau. She cooks a fake meal. She coaches her younger son through every line of the deception. Was she wrong? She lied. She manipulated her blind, dying husband. She shattered her family. Jacob had to flee for his life, and she never saw him again. But she also had a prophecy. God told her the younger would rule. And when Isaac tried to give the blessing to the wrong son, Rebekah corrected course. She did what she believed God had already decided. The question the Bible leaves hanging in the air and never answers is whether the right outcome justifies the wrong method. Pay attention to this. Rachel and Leah are the wives who turn the book of Genesis into something that feels like a modern drama. 2 sisters, same husband, same house. But the Hebrew describes them with 2 different words that tell you everything. Rachel is described as yefat toar, beautiful in form. Leah is described as having einayim rakkot, soft eyes or weak eyes. One sister had beauty. The other had eyes that saw what beauty could not. 2 women, 2 gifts, and neither one got what she actually wanted. Jacob loved Rachel. He worked 7 years for the right to marry her. On the wedding night, Laban, Rachel's father, switched daughters. In the dark of the tent, under the veil, Jacob married Leah instead. He did not realize until morning. 7 years of labor, the wrong bride. And Laban's excuse, "It is not our custom to give the younger daughter before the firstborn." The irony is devastating. Jacob, who stole his brother's birthright by pretending to be the firstborn, is now deceived by a man who insists on the rights of the firstborn. Jacob married Rachel too, a week later, for the price of 7 more years of labor. And what followed was a fertility war that reads like a reality show. Leah bore son after son, naming each one with a desperate prayer. Reuben, see a son, because surely now my husband will love me. Simeon, because the Lord heard I was not loved. Levi, now at last, my husband will become attached to me. You can hear the ache in those names. Every child was an offering, an attempt to buy the love of a man who slept in another woman's tent. And Rachel, beautiful Rachel, the one Jacob loved, was barren. She watched her sister produce child after child while her own womb remained empty. She screamed at Jacob, "Give me children, or I will die." And he shouted back, "Am I in the place of God?" They traded mandrakes, an ancient fertility herb, for nights with Jacob. Leah's son found mandrakes in the field, and Rachel offered Leah a night with their shared husband in exchange for the plants. Leah agreed. She walked out to meet Jacob in the field and said, "You must sleep with me tonight. I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." Hired, that is the word the Bible uses. A wife hiring her own husband with herbs picked by a child. Rachel eventually bore Joseph, the boy with the colorful coat, the boy who would save Egypt and Israel from famine. And then she bore Benjamin, and she died giving birth to him, on the road to Bethlehem. And Jacob buried her there and set a pillar over her tomb that still stands. But it gets stranger. Jael is the wife who killed a general with a tent peg. The story is in Judges chapter 4. Israel is at war with the Canaanite king Jabin, whose army commander is a man named Sisera, a brutal military leader with 900 iron chariots. God sends a storm that bogs down the chariots in mud. Sisera's army is routed. Sisera himself flees on foot. He arrives at the tent of Jael, wife of Heber the Kenite. The Kenites are at peace with Jabin. Sisera believes he is safe. Jael comes out to meet him. "Turn in, my lord," she says. "Do not be afraid." She gives him milk to drink. She covers him with a blanket. He falls asleep. And then Jael takes a tent peg, the iron stake used to anchor desert tents, and a mallet. She walks quietly to where Sisera is sleeping, and she drives the tent peg through his temple into the ground. The prophetess Deborah celebrated Jael in a song that is one of the oldest pieces of poetry in the Bible. "Most blessed of women be Jael," Deborah sings. "She struck Sisera. She crushed his head. She shattered and pierced his temple." This is not a man's war poem. This is two women, a prophetess and a tent dweller, celebrating the end of a tyrant. Now watch what happens next. Abigail is the wife who saved her entire household by disobeying her husband. Her husband was named Nabal, a wealthy sheep farmer whose name literally means fool in Hebrew. David and his men had been protecting Nabal's shepherds in the wilderness, and when David sent messengers asking for provisions, Nabal insulted them. "Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse?" Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. David strapped on his sword and marched toward Nabal's estate with 400 armed men, swearing he would kill every male in the household by morning. Abigail heard what her husband had done. She did not ask permission. She loaded donkeys with 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs. She rode out to meet David alone. She bowed before him and took the blame entirely on herself. She called her husband a fool to his face through a message. She told David that God had sent her to prevent him from shedding blood unnecessarily. She said, "And this is remarkable, when the Lord has done for my Lord every good thing he promised concerning you, and has appointed you ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed. She talked a future king out of a massacre, with bread and figs and diplomacy. David sheathed his sword. He said, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment." 10 days later, Nabal died. The text says, God struck him, and his heart became like a stone. David sent for Abigail. She became his wife. Here is the part nobody tells you. Bathsheba is the wife most people think they understand. They are wrong. The traditional reading goes like this. David saw a beautiful woman bathing on a rooftop. He desired her. He took her. She became pregnant. He murdered her husband, Uriah, to cover the sin. The prophet Nathan confronted him. David repented. End of story. But look closer. Bathsheba did not seduce David. She did not climb to that rooftop to be seen. The text says she was purifying herself after her monthly period, a religious ritual required by law. She was obeying Torah. David was the one on the rooftop at a time when kings were supposed to be at war, and when David summoned her, she had no choice. In the ancient world, when a king sends for you, you go. Refusal was not an option. The power imbalance was absolute. Bathsheba lost everything: her privacy, her body, her husband, Uriah, who was so loyal to his fellow soldiers that he refused to go home and sleep in his own bed while they fought in the field. David had him placed at the front of the fiercest battle and ordered the other soldiers to withdraw. Uriah died because he was honorable and his king was not. And then Bathsheba lost her first child. The baby born from that night died 7 days after birth. David wept and fasted and lay on the ground. When the child died, David got up, washed, ate, and worshipped. His servants were confused. David explained, "I will go to him, but he will not return to me." And this is where it gets remarkable. Bathsheba bore another son, Solomon, the wisest king in Israel's history, the builder of the temple, the son through whom the royal line continued, the line that Matthew's gospel traces all the way to Jesus. And in that genealogy, in the first chapter of the New Testament, Bathsheba is named, not as David's wife, as Uriah's wife. The gospel writer refuses to let the reader forget whose wife she really was, and what David did to get her. Bathsheba survived the worst thing a king could do to a woman, and her son built the house of God. There is one more wife, and she never gets a name. The book of Hosea begins with one of the most disturbing commands in all of Scripture. God tells the prophet Hosea, "Go marry a promiscuous woman," not "find a good woman," not "marry someone faithful." God commands Hosea to marry a woman named Gomer, a woman who will betray him, leave him, sleep with other men, and break his heart repeatedly. And Hosea does it. He marries her. They have children. She leaves, she returns, she leaves again. She ends up so broken and so enslaved that Hosea has to buy her back, literally purchase her from slavery for 15 shekels of silver and a quantity of barley. And God says, "This is the point. This is what I feel. This is what my love looks like. I am the husband. Israel is the unfaithful wife, and I keep buying her back." The entire book of Hosea is a love story told through the metaphor of a marriage that should have ended. God used a real woman's pain, a real man's heartbreak, and a real family's destruction to make a theological point about divine faithfulness. You are allowed to be uncomfortable with that. The prophets often make us uncomfortable. That is what they are for. So what do the wives of the Bible teach us? First, they were not supporting characters. Sarah negotiated with God. Rebekah redirected a covenant. Rachel and Leah built the 12 tribes. Jael ended a war. Abigail prevented a massacre. Bathsheba survived a king's crime and raised a greater one. Gomer became a living parable of God's love. These women did not stand behind great men. They stood beside them, ahead of them, and sometimes against them. Second, the Bible does not sanitize their stories. It records the surrogacy, the deception, the fertility wars, the violence, the abuse. It shows women who were traded by their husbands, deceived by their fathers, and violated by their kings. The Bible does not pretend this was acceptable. It records it because pretending does not heal anything. And third, this is the one I want you to carry. In the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1, 4 women are named before Mary. Tamar, who disguised herself as a prostitute to claim her legal rights. Rahab, who was an actual prostitute in Jericho. Ruth, a foreign widow who had no social standing. And Bathsheba, Uriah's wife, the woman taken by a king. Not one of them fits the profile of a proper ancestor for the Son of God. And that is exactly why they are there. The lineage of Jesus does not pass through perfect women. It passes through survivors. Which wife's story surprised you the most? Which one do you wish you had learned about sooner? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. If this changed how you see the women of the Bible, hit subscribe. We go deep into the stories that hide in plain sight. Every week, a new mystery, a new revelation, a new reason to look again at the most extraordinary book ever written. I will see you in the next one.